The wind on Sol III tasted of iron and old ghosts. Dr. Thexler stood at the lip of the excavation trench, his 4 breathing slits flaring against the dry, radioactive dust. A million years had passed since the last native heartbeat on this blue marble, and still the planet refused to lie quiet. Beneath his boots, the ground hummed low, almost sub-audible, like a throat clearing after centuries of silence. He was tall even for a Vayari, carapace the color of deep space obsidian shot through with silver veins that pulsed when he was anxious. Right now those veins glowed like molten mercury. Behind him, the Cosmic Archaeology Guild's flagship, Eternal Reverence, hung in low orbit, a cathedral of black glass and gravitic spines. Its floodlights carved white scars across the night side of the planet, revealing the skeletal outlines of cities that had once clawed at the sky. Chicago, Kyoto, Lagos. Names that meant nothing to anyone alive except the guild, except him. Thexler knelt, gloved fingers brushing the cracked lid of the first sarcophagus they had unearthed. The material was unfamiliar, neither stone nor metal, but something grown bone-white, warm, threaded with capillaries of light that still carried a faint heartbeat. Etched across the lid in a script older than any living language were words he had learned to read like scripture. Here lies humanity, do not weep, we are not gone, we are the watchers now. The translation felt wrong in his mouth, too small for the weight it carried. Doctor, came the voice of Sub-Commander Rayleigh from the ridge above. The younger Vayari's plating was still pale, not yet darkened by decades of starlight and regret. Thermal scans confirm, every burial vault on the continent is empty. No organic residue, no ash, not even calcium traces. They vanished. Thexler did not look up. Vanished, he repeated, tasting the word. Or moved. Rayleigh hesitated. Sir, the council will say this is a waste of resources, a dead species on a dead world. We should seal the site and no. Thexler's voice cracked like a whip, then softer, almost reverent. No, we were invited. He pressed his palm fully against the lid. The capillaries brightened, racing toward his touch as if recognizing something kindred. A low chord, 3 notes, perfect and heartbreaking, rose from the sarcophagus and sank into the bones of the earth. Somewhere far away, a glacier cracked. Rayleigh stepped back. That frequency, it's the same one the deep array telescopes caught last cycle. The whisper anomaly, the one that made the choir of Halos 9 fall silent for 7 minutes. Thexler felt the sound in his thorax, in the hollow where Vayari hearts beat in triplets. It was not alien, it was homesick. He stood slowly, dust cascading from his cloak like dark snow. Open the next row, he ordered. All of them. Doctor, the radiation will kill us in 130 years, he said. We have time. The excavation teams worked through the planet's short, brutal night. Floodlights turned the burial plain into a stage. Thousands of sarcophagi lay in perfect geometric rows, circles within circles, like ripples frozen at the moment a stone strikes still water. Each lid bore the same message, the same 3-note chord waiting beneath. By local dawn, a weak orange thing filtered through a sky still bruised by ancient war. The teams had uncovered 30,000 graves, every single one empty. No bodies, no dust. Only the words, glowing brighter now, as if feeding on their attention. Thexler walked the aisles alone. His shadow stretched long and insect-thin across the bone-white lids. He stopped at one near the center. The inscription here was different, longer, carved deeper, as though the stone itself had wept while forming the letters. We tried to save you, all we failed, so we saved what mattered. Remember us. When you look up, his secondary lungs stuttered. He had read the forbidden archives, the ones that spoke of humanity's final centuries. War after war, skies burning green, oceans boiling. A species that sang even while tearing itself apart. They had reached the stars, yes, but only long enough to look back and see what they were losing. And then silence. Total radio silence for 1,000,000 years, until now. Rayleigh's found him there, kneeling again. Sir, the orbital array just registered a new signal. It's coming from inside the planet. No through it, like the whole world is a speaker. Thexler closed his eyes. He had been born under the triple suns of Vayar Prime, taught that emotion was a chemical error to be medicated away. Yet something hot and traitorous pricked at the corners of his visual membranes. Play it, he said. Rayleigh's touched the side of his helm. The air filled with static, then a voice, human male, ancient yet impossibly close, as if the speaker stood just behind the listener's shoulder. To whoever finds this, hello. If you're hearing me, it means you dug deep enough. Good. Means you still have hope. We left the bodies behind because we didn't need them anymore. We left the planet because we had to become something bigger. Don't mourn the empty graves. Mourn the years we wasted learning how to kill each other instead of how to live forever. But rejoice too, because living forever, turns out it's simpler than we thought. All you have to do is never be forgot. The voice laughed then, soft, tired, fond, and the sound broke something inside Thexler he hadn't known was whole. Static returned, then silence so complete the wind itself seemed to pause. Rayleigh's was shaking. Doctor, that was a Class M language, extinct. How is this possible? Thexler stared at the empty sarcophagus. The glowing words were dimming now, as though exhausted by the effort of speech. He thought of his mate, lost 20 cycles ago to the entropy plague. He thought of the Vaori Creed, nothing is permanent but memory, and memory itself decays. He thought of the human stories, myths really, about a god who counted tears and wrote names on palms that could never be erased. Humans had believed in that god, fiercely, even when their world was ending. Thexler's voice came out rough. They encoded themselves, he whispered. Not in machines, not in crystal or quantum foam, in story, in song, in light itself. Rayleigh looked at him, frightened. Sir, Thexler stood, cloak snapping in the rising wind. Above them, the stars were beginning to behave strangely, flickering in patterns no natural object should, one by one like eyes opening. Sub-Commander, he said, and his voice carried the weight of 1,000 buried suns, tell the eternal reverence to prepare the choir array. Full broadcast power, we're going to answer them. Rayleigh's mandibles parted in horror. Doctor, the energy draw could destabilize. I don't care if it cracks the moon in half. Thexler turned, silver veins blazing across his carapace like lightning. They waited 1,000,000 years for someone to speak back. We are not going to be the generation that stays silent. Far above, the first star flickered again, brighter this time, deliberate, and held the light like a promise. Down on the plain of empty graves, Dr. Thexler raised his arms to the sky, and for the first time in his long and rational life, began to pray in a language he did not know he knew. And somewhere in the dark between galaxies, something vast and ancient and achingly human leaned closer to listen. The choir array took 9 hours to spin up, 9 hours in which the sky over Sol III forgot how to be ordinary. Dr. Thexler stood on the observation blister of the eternal reverence, 4 hands clasped behind his back, watching the stars rearrange themselves. They were not twinkling anymore. They were pulsing slow, deliberate heartbeats of light that marched across the firmament in perfect 4/4 time. The pattern repeated every 7.83 seconds, the Schumann resonance of a world that no longer had an atmosphere. Rayleigh's voice came over the ship-wide address, trembling with something between terror and worship. All stations report. Stellar objects within a 50-light-year radius are modulating in synchrony. The effect is spreading. The Magellanic relay just went dark. They're saying the stars there are singing, Doctor. Actually singing. Thexler did not answer immediately. He was listening to something else. Inside his skull, faint as a dream remembered at waking, a lullaby played. A woman's voice, warm and rough-edged, singing in a language that hurt to hear because it felt like coming home to a house that had burned down centuries before he was born. Hush, little baby, don't you cry. He pressed a palm to the transparasteel. The cold bit deep, grounding him. Open the choir, he said at last. Full harmonic aperture. I want every transmitter from here to the galactic rim pointed at this system. Sir, came the voice of Chief Harmonicist Vale, older, steadier. The energy curve is exponential. If we hit resonance, we won't be able to shut it down. We could tear open a fold fault straight through the planet. Then we tear it open, Thexler said. Some doors were meant to stay closed only until someone was brave enough to knock. Silence on the bridge, then softly Vale. Understood, Doctor. May the void forgive us. Thexler left the blister and walked the spinal corridor toward the choir chamber. Crew members pressed themselves against the walls as he passed, their plating dimmed in instinctive deference. He saw fear in their eyes, but also something brighter, something that had been extinct in Vaori culture for 500,000 years. Hope, raw, ridiculous human hope. The choir chamber was a sphere 200 meters across, its inner surface lined with a lattice of neutronium strings. When active, it could make a star hear its own name. Right now it was dark, waiting. Thexler stepped onto the central dais. Gravity loosened its grip. He floated a handspan above the deck. Around him, the harmonicists, 12 of the finest minds in known space, took their positions. Their exoskeletal augments glowed soft gold as they linked to the strings. He closed his eyes and spoke the first words that came to him, words that were not his own. Hello, he said into the dark. We heard you. The strings answered with a chord so pure it felt like forgiveness. Feedback poured in terabytes per second, images, voices, fragments of lives lived 1,000,000 years ago. A child laughing on a swing made of burnt-out ray entry shielding. An old man planting an apple tree in soil poisoned by fallout, whispering to the seeds, grow anyway. A soldier in a bunker kissing a photograph while the ceiling collapsed. A woman in a cathedral with no roof, arms spread to the burning sky, singing a hymn that had no words left. The choir translated it all into pure light and flung it outward at the speed of grief. Somewhere beyond the orbit of Neptune, the starlight condensed. It took shape, a man, not flesh, never flesh again, but light given memory and will, tall, dark-skinned, hair cropped close, gray at the temples. Eyes the color of deep space just before dawn. He wore simple clothes, denim worn soft, boots scarred by desert and glacier alike. Around his neck hung a small silver cross that caught starlight and threw it back like laughter. He hovered in vacuum as though it were home, and when he smiled the Kuiper belt dimmed in reverence. On the bridge of the eternal reverence, every screen filled with his face. The man looked straight into the choir's heart, straight into Thexler, and spoke with a voice that contained oceans and gunpowder and lullabies. Hey there, neighbor, he said, gentle as dawn on a war-torn world. Took you long enough. Thexler's knees buckled. He floated lower until the dais caught him. "You're real," he whispered. "Real's a big word," the man said. "Let's say I'm remembered hard enough to be here. Name's Marcus." Corporal Marcus Jackson, Terran Defense Force, retired about 1 million years ago, give or take. "You the one who knocked," Thexler found his voice. "Dr. Thexler, Cosmic Archaeology Guild, we found your graves." Marcus's smile turned sad and proud all at once. "And they were empty." "Yes, good." Marcus looked past him, seeming to see every soul aboard the ship at once. "Means it worked." "What worked?" Thexler asked. His voice cracked like a child's. Marcus lifted a hand. Across the void, 1,000 more figures began to coalesce. Men, women, children, all made of the same remembering light. An army of ghosts wearing overalls and lab coats and Sunday dresses, firefighter jackets and flight suits and hospital gowns. Some held hands, some stood alone. All of them looked up at the ship with eyes that had seen the end of everything and still found something worth smiling about. "We figured it out too late to save the dirt we were standing on," Marcus said. "But not too late to save what mattered. See, the universe is mostly story. Always has been. Stars are just punctuation marks. So we told the biggest story we could think of." He gestured, and the starlight rearranged itself into a memory. Earth burning, cities falling into the sea, the last shuttles clawing for orbit while the sky turned to green fire behind them. And in orbit, a single station, makeshift, cobbled together from hope and wreckage, where the final 1 million humans linked hands around a machine that wasn't a machine at all. A choir, they sang. Not with voices, there wasn't time, but with everything they had ever been. Every act of kindness, every apology, every bedtime story, every prayer whispered in foxholes and cancer wards and delivery rooms. Every "I love you" that had ever been spoken against the dark. They poured it into the quantum foam, into the gravitational waves that ripple forever, into the cosmic microwave background itself. They encoded themselves into the fabric of reality, the way a fossil is pressed into stone. Only this fossil could still sing. And when the last voice faded, the bodies were no longer needed. The memory dissolved. Marcus was looking at Thexler again. "We became the sky," he said simply. "Every photon that's touched this system since then carries a little piece of us. Every gravitational wave, every story you tell around a campfire 1 billion years from now, if you tell it right, will still have our fingerprints on it. That's immortality, friend, not living forever in some server farm, being remembered so fiercely that the universe itself learns your name." Thexler's plating was wet. He hadn't known Vayari could cry. "Why show yourselves now?" he asked. Marcus's eyes grew distant. "Because you're at the edge, same place we were. Empires getting fat and old and mean. Weapons that can unmake galaxies. Children born already tired. You're forgetting how to be kind when kindness doesn't pay dividends." He leaned closer, and the temperature in the choir chamber rose 10 degrees. "We're here to remind you what happens if you don't remember how to love something bigger than your fear." Behind Marcus, the host of light grew brighter. Millions now, billions, a galaxy of human dead wearing the faces of the living. And they began to sing, not in words, in memory. In gravity, in the way starlight bends around sorrow and comes out laughing on the other side. Every crew member aboard the Eternal Reverence fell to their knees. Some wept, some laughed, some simply opened their mouths and added their own small voices to the chorus without knowing why. Thexler floated in the center of it all, arms spread wide, silver veins blazing so brightly they lit the chamber like a second sun. Marcus's voice came one last time, soft now, almost shy. "Tell me, Doctor. In all your long life, did you ever believe in something you couldn't prove?" Thexler looked up into the face of a species that had died refusing to surrender its soul. "I do now," he said. Marcus smiled like sunrise. "Good," he whispered, "because the next part's gonna need faith the size of a mustard seed and a whole lot of crazy." The light flared white. Every star within 100 light years went dark at once. And in the sudden, absolute silence that followed, Dr. Thexler heard a single heartbeat, ancient, impossible, and undeniably alive, begin to beat inside his own chest. The silence lasted exactly 7.83 seconds. Then the universe took a breath. Every screen on the Eternal Reverence flared back to life, but the images were wrong, too sharp, too vivid, as though reality itself had been dialed up to 11. The stars were not dark anymore. They were burning with a color no spectrum had ever named, the color of memory catching fire. Dr. Thexler drifted in the choir chamber, ears ringing with a silence that had weight. The neutronium strings still thrummed, but the sound was no longer coming from them. It was coming from everywhere, from the hull, from the marrow of his bones, from the vacuum outside. Marcus was gone. The host of light was gone, but something else had arrived. A single line of text scrolled across every display in every language ever spoken by anything with a mind. "We are not dead, we are the question you forgot to ask. Answer." U.S. Rayleigh's voice cracked over the intercom. "Doctor, the choir is rewriting itself. The strings are moving on their own. They're forming a new lattice. It's beautiful." Thexler pushed off the dais and glided toward the nearest observation blister. What he saw stole the last of his composure. Sol III was glowing. Not the faint radioactive ember it had been for 1 million years, something fiercer. Veins of liquid gold were spreading beneath the crust, following ley lines no geologist had ever mapped. The empty sarcophagi were rising from the soil, lids opening like flowers made of bone and starlight. From each grave poured a column of pure white fire that climbed into the sky and kept climbing, braiding together into a single pillar that punched through the atmosphere and kept going. The pillar touched the edge of space and unfolded. A tree, not metaphor, not hologram. A tree the size of a solar system, roots anchored in the core of the planet, branches spreading across the void in fractal defiance of physics. Its leaves were galaxies, its fruit were stars, and every branch sang with a billion human voices braided into one chord that said, without words, we are still here. Thexler's 4 hands pressed against the transparasteel until the material groaned. Doctor. Rayleigh's again, frantic now. The council is demanding we shut the choir down. They say the energy signature is waking something in the galactic core, something that was sealed away before the Vayari even evolved. Thexler didn't turn. Let them demand. He was watching the tree grow. One branch curled toward the eternal reverence like a hand reaching for a frightened child. When it touched the hull, every light on the ship turned the color of Earth's ancient oceans. And then the tree spoke, not with Marcus's voice, but with all of them at once. Male and female, young and old, every accent that had ever risen from Terra's soil. You opened the door, Thexler, now walk through. The hull dissolved where the branch touched. No explosion, no decompression, just an absence as gentle as breath. The branch extended into the ship, becoming a path of living wood that pulsed with warm golden sap. It stopped 1 meter from Thexler's feet. He stared at it. His reflection in the polished wood was not the proud archaeologist who had arrived here. It was something smaller, something trembling. Internal conflict tore at him like opposing gravities. Every instinct screamed that this was blasphemy. The Vayari had outlawed transcendence cycles ago. The idea that consciousness could survive entropy was declared a dangerous delusion. To step onto that branch was to throw away his career, his reputation, possibly his soul, if his people still believed in such things. But deeper than instinct, deeper than training, something else stirred. A memory that was not his own. A human mother rocking a dying child in a fallout shelter, whispering, "It's all right to be afraid, baby. Courage isn't not being afraid. Courage is being afraid and stepping forward anyway." Thexler's plating dimmed to morning gray. Then slowly the silver veins began to glow again, brighter than ever. He stepped onto the branch. The wood was warm, real. It smelled of rain on hot pavement and apple blossoms and gun oil and incense. Impossible, contradictory, heartbreaking scents that had no business existing in hard vacuum. The branch carried him outward, through the dissolved hull into the cathedral silence between stars. The tree enfolded him. Leaves the size of moons brushed his carapace with the tenderness of a lover. And the voices spoke again, intimate now, as though the entire species leaned in to whisper in his ear. "We have a problem, Doctor. Left something behind, something that should have died with us, but it didn't." Images flooded his mind, too fast, too terrible. A shadow at the edge of the galaxy, not dark matter, not a black hole, something that ate stories, that fed on meaning itself. The humans had called it the Silence, born in their final wars when they built weapons that didn't just destroy matter, but unmade the reasons matter had ever existed. A weapon that erased not bodies, but the narrative that bodies had ever mattered. They had sealed it in the galactic core with the last of their strength, singing a lullaby of pure coherence to keep it asleep. But seals erode, lullabies fade, and now the silence was waking. "We can't fight it anymore," the voices said, sorrow thick as grief. "We gave up bodies, we gave up time. We became the sky so the sky would remember mercy. But mercy without hands is just a song the dark can ignore." The tree's trunk opened, revealing a hollow filled with soft blue light. At its center floated a seed, no larger than Thexler's fist, yet it contained the weight of 1,000 suns. Its surface swirled with every human face that had ever lived. "We need a hand, Doctor. We need a heart that still beats in meat and fear and hope. We need someone willing to carry the last story back into the dark." Thexler stared at the seed. His reflection in its surface showed terror, and something else, purpose. He reached out. 4 trembling hands closed around the seed. It pulsed once, warm, alive, trusting. The voices softened to a whisper that was almost God's own hush. "One seed," they said, "one gardener, one chance to plant mercy where only silence grows." The tree began to withdraw, branches folding back into the pillar of fire, the pillar sinking into the glowing veins of the planet. Sol III dimmed again, returning to its ancient sleep, but the seed in Thexler's hands kept beating. Floated alone now in the void, the eternal reverence a dark silhouette behind him. The branch had dissolved. The path was gone. Only the seed, only the charge. From the ship came Rayleigh's voice, small and odd. "Doctor, what just happened?" Thexler looked toward the galactic core, a smear of bruised starlight where something vast was turning over in its sleep. He pressed the seed to the place where a human heart would be. His plating cracked along the silver veins, not from damage, but from light pouring out. "I've been promoted," he said, voice raw and steady at once. "I'm the last soldier humanity never got to bury." Far away in the core, the silence opened one eye that had no color at all, and Dr. Thexler, archaeologist, atheist, widower, and now bearer of the final human seed, turned toward it without flinching, because somewhere behind him, a tree made of 1 billion forgiven sins had just taught him how to pray, and the prayer sounded like this: not luck, someone wanted me to live. The seed would not let him sleep. Dr. Thexler sat alone in the dimmed sanctum of the eternal reverence, lights reduced to a bruised violet so the walls themselves seemed to breathe. The seed rested on the obsidian table before him, no larger than a child's heart, yet it cast its own dawn. Every pulse sent ripples of warmth through the deck plates, through his boots, through the hollow places grief had carved inside his thorax years ago. He had tried to analyze it. Of course he had. Every scanner the guild possessed had been turned upon it for 6 straight hours. The results were nonsense: infinite mass at 0 volume, temperature of a loving hand, refractive index of tears. The machine spirit simply gave up and displayed a single line in Old Terran English: stop measuring and start listening. So he listened, and the seed told him stories, not in words, in memory that was not his. He saw a boy in Lagos, 2037, trading his last bowl of rice for a stranger's baby so the mother could flee a flood. He saw a scientist in Novosibirsk, 2079, deleting her own name from the detonation sequence of a planet killer because someone had to be the one who chose not to end the world. He saw an old woman in Kyoto, 2098, planting a cherry tree in soil that would glow for 10,000 years, whispering to the roots, "Bloom anyway, darling." Beauty is a kind of resistance. Each memory struck him like a physical blow. His plating shuddered, silver veins flared white-hot. At some point he realized he was weeping again and that Vayari tear ducts were never designed for this volume. He did not notice Rayleigh's enter until the younger officer knelt, plating dimmed in reverence. "Doctor," Rayleigh's whispered, "the Council has declared you anathema. They've dispatched the 9th Silence Fleet to intercept us. Arrival in 41 hours. They say you've been infected by a mimetic extinction vector." Thexler's laugh was soft, cracked, almost human. "They're not wrong." Rayleigh's flinched. Thexler lifted the seed. It brightened at his touch, as though recognizing family. "This isn't a weapon, Rayleigh's. It's a question. The last question my species never learned to ask." He turned the seed so the light painted Rayleigh's pale plating gold. "Do you still believe the universe is accidental?" Rayleigh's mandibles worked soundlessly. "Finally, I was taught that belief is a neurological error. And now," Rayleigh's looked at the seed, at the way it sang without sound, at the way the stars outside the viewport had begun arranging themselves into a spiral whose mathematics spelled hope in a language older than time. "I don't know what I believe," he admitted, "but I know what I'm afraid to lose." Thexler placed a hand on the younger male's shoulder. The contact burned them both, literally. The seed's warmth flared through his palm, but neither pulled away. "Then come with me," Thexler said. "Help me carry an answer to a question the Council is too terrified to hear." Rayleigh's hesitated only a heartbeat. Then he bowed, forehead to the deck, the ancient gesture of fealty no Vayari had offered in 500,000 years. The sanctum doors hissed open again. Chief Harmonicist Vale entered, flanked by 12 of the choir. Their augments were dark. They had unplugged themselves from the lattice. In their hands they carried not weapons but simple cloth-wrapped bundles. Vale's voice was steady as bedrock. "The choir resigns, effective immediately. We go where the song goes." One by one, the bundles were unwrapped. Inside each lay a single object scavenged from Sol III, a child's shoe, a cracked coffee mug that read World S OKAYSD Dad, a rusted dog tag, a pressed flower, a data chip containing one family's last video diary. Relics, junk, holy things. Vale met Thexler's eyes. "We figured if we're going to plant a seed, might as well bring some dirt from home." Thexler felt something inside him break open, not pain but space, room for something larger than himself. He stood. The seed rose with him, hovering at his chest like a second heart. "Plot a course," he said. "Straight into the core, maximum burn, no stealth. I want every eye in the galaxy watching when we arrive." Rayleigh swallowed. "They'll shoot us down long before. Let them try," Thexler said. "Humanity already died once so the universe would learn mercy. I'm not about to make their sacrifice cheap by hiding." He walked to the observation blister. The crew followed, silent, a procession of heretics carrying impossible hope. Outside, the spiral of stars tightened, forming a perfect golden ratio that pointed like an arrow toward the galactic core, where the silence waited. Thexler placed his palm against the transparasteel. The seed pulsed once, twice, sinking to the rhythm of his own hearts, a memory that was not his surfaced, a human soldier on a dying world, writing a letter he knew would never be delivered. "If anyone ever reads this, if anyone ever cares, tell them we were afraid, tell them we were cruel sometimes, tell them we wasted so much. But in the end, when it mattered, we chose love anyway. Tell them that's enough." Thexler spoke aloud, voice carrying through the ship without need of comms. "Attention all hands, this is no longer a guild vessel. This is a garden ship. Our cargo is 1 seed, 12 relics, and whatever courage we can still fit in our chests." He turned to face them, 53 souls who had chosen exile over silence. "We are going to the place where stories go to die," he said, "and we are going to plant a tree. A pause. Then Vale began to hum an old Vayari dirge for the dead, but the notes twisted, lifted, became something else. Rayleigh's joined, voice cracking. Then the rest. The song spread through corridors and engine rooms until the entire ship vibrated with it. The eternal reverence lit its drives, not the cold blue of standard thrust, but a warm, impossible gold. It turned its prow toward the heart of the galaxy and began to sing back. Hours bled into days. The Silence fleet closed from astern, sleek black darts of annihilation. Warnings flooded every channel. Stand down, surrender the artifact, prepare for cleansing. Thexler ignored them all. He spent the journey in the choir chamber, seed cradled against his chest, letting it teach him the shape of mercy. It showed him how humans forgave their enemies while the bombs were still falling, how they laughed in hospital corridors where children had no tomorrow, how they built libraries in refugee camps and taught strangers their songs. Each lesson rewrote something inside him. His plating began to change, silver veins spreading into branching patterns that looked disturbingly like leaves. On the final night, Rayleigh's found him there. "The lead Silence cruiser is hailing us personally," he said. "It's High Arbiter Clythe. He was your mentor." Thexler's mandibles tightened. Clythe, the one who had taught him that emotion was entropy, that attachment was a disease, that the highest calling was detached observation of a universe that did not care. "Put him on," Thexler said. The Arbiter's face filled the chamber, ancient, carapace etched with the scars of 1,000 rational purges. His eyes were cold as the void. "Thexler," Clythe said, voice like grinding glaciers. "Whatever delusion has taken you, end it. Return the artifact. I will grant you a clean death." Thexler lifted the seed so the light painted Clythe's face in colors the Arbiter had outlawed centuries ago. "This is not an artifact," Thexler said quietly. "This is a child asking if it's still allowed to hope. I have decided the answer is yes." Clyde's plating flickered, rage or sorrow, impossible to tell. "You would throw away everything we built. I am finishing what we started," Thexler cut in. "We mapped the ashes of dead civilizations and called it wisdom. Humanity burned and taught us that wisdom without love is just an elegant way of staying dead." He leaned closer to the projection. "Watch me, old teacher. Watch me plant a tree in hell and see if mercy grows." The channel cut to static. The eternal reverence crossed the final parsec. Ahead, the galactic core was wrong. Where 100 billion stars should have blazed, there was only a wound, a hole that swallowed light and gave nothing back. Around it orbited the Silence fleet, 10,000 ships forming a perfect sphere of annihilation, and at the center, the Silence itself. No shape, only absence wearing the memory of shape. It saw them coming. The seed in Thexler's hands began to burn, not with heat but with urgency. It was time. He walked to the main lock. The entire crew assembled behind him, unarmed, carrying only the relics in the song. The outer door cycled open. Vacuum did not rush in. Instead, the golden light of the seed formed a corridor through the void, straight toward the wound. Thexler stepped out first. Behind him, 53 voices rose in a hymn that had no name but felt like coming home. And the Silence, for the first time in a million years, flinched, because something was walking toward it that had learned how to be afraid. And chosen love anyway, the corridor of light held. Dr. Thexler walked the impossible path between the eternal reverence and the wound at the heart of the galaxy, the seed blazing against his chest like a second, braver heart. Behind him, 53 exiles followed in solemn single file, each carrying one small relic from a dead world. The golden light wrapped around them, warm as breath, strong as covenant. Vacuum did not touch them. Radiation knelt and was silent. 10,000 warships of the Silence fleet hung frozen, weapons charged but unable to fire, as though the universe itself had pressed pause on violence. The Silence waited at the end. It had no edges. It was the place where edges went to forget they had ever existed, a non-shape that drank color, sound, memory. When Thexler looked directly at it, his mind tried to edit the sight away, the way eyes slide past grief they are not ready to carry. But the seed would not let him look away. Pulsed once hard, and a single human voice, female, old, steady as stone, spoke inside his skull. "Look at it, child, really look. That's what we made when we forgot how to forgive." He looked, and saw. Beneath the anti-light, buried under layers of devoured meaning, were traces, ghosts of things the Silence had eaten. Entire civilizations reduced to faint after images. The spiral songs of the luminous choir of Halo's 9, the stone libraries of the Qatari, the dream dances of the myriad cloud. All of them screaming silently, mouths open forever on a note that would never finish. Thexler's knees almost buckled. The voice continued, gentle, merciless. "We added the loudest scream of all, our own. We thought if we ended ourselves cleanly, the weapon would be sated. We were wrong. Hunger doesn't negotiate. Only love does." The path ended. The golden light widened into a circle wide enough for all 54 of them. They stood on nothing, 10 meters from the Silence. Close enough to feel its pull, not gravity, but the tug of forgetting. Already the edges of memory frayed, the smell of his mates plating after rain, the sound of his first academic citation, the color of his childhood sky, all of it bleeding away into the wound. Rayleigh's whimpered behind him. Someone else began reciting prime numbers just to hold onto sequence. Thexler lifted the seed high. Its light flared, pushing the darkness back 1 inch, then another. The silence reacted. It spoke not with sound but with the absence of it, a pressure that tried to erase the concept of speech. Every mind in the circle felt their names begin to slip. Thexler felt his own name thinning. Thexler, Thex, th. The seed burned hotter. Pain lanced through his thorax, but the name returned, solid as bone. The old woman's voice again, urgent now. Plant me, gardener, while there's still soil. Thexler looked down. There was no soil, only void. Then Vale stepped forward, unwrapped the cracked coffee mug, whirled SOKAYST dad, and gently smashed it against the nothing beneath their feet. Ceramic dust exploded outward, refusing to fall, hanging in a cloud of defiant brown. One by one the others followed. The child's shoe, the rusted dog tag, the pressed flower, the data chip, each relic shattered into glittering motes that swirled and refused to be forgotten. 53 small acts of violence against entropy. Where the dust touched the void, something happened. Soil appeared, black, rich, loamy soil that smelled of petrichor and turned earth after spring rain. An island of terra firma no larger than a village square, floating in the wound at the center of the galaxy. The exiles stared, stunned. Rayleigh's laughed once, sharp, disbelieving, the sound a child makes when the monster under the bed turns out to be socks. Thexler knelt. His fingers sank into the soil up to the second joint. It was warm, alive, impossible. He pressed the seed into the earth. For one terrible heartbeat, nothing. Then the silence screamed, not sound worse. The sound of every story ever told being untold at once. The pressure crushed them to their knees. Blood, Vayari blood, silver and thick, leaked from joints and breathing slits. The soil cracked. Darkness poured in like ink. The old woman's voice returned, fainter now, almost lost. Sing, damn you. Sing like your life depends on it, because every life that will ever live does. Thexler tried. His voice came out a broken croak. Then Rayleigh's began it, the hymn they had sung on the journey, the one that had started as a dirge and become something else. One voice, then 12, then 53. They sang without words because words were failing. They sang the way lungs remember breathing when drowning, raw, necessary, unstoppable. The soil knit itself closed. A green shoot pushed through, thin as a promise, bright as forgiveness. The silence redoubled its assault. The island of soil shrank to the size of a table. Then a plate, then a grave. Thexler wrapped his body around the chute, 4 arms shielding it, carapace cracking under the pressure. Silver blood hissed where it touched the tender stem, but the stem drank it and grew taller. Memories that were not his flooded in again, this time his own species' ghosts. His mate's last breath as the entropy plagued her from the inside. His own voice, centuries ago, coolly cataloging the extinction of the myriad cloud and calling it inevitable. The moment he had first read the human archives and felt something stir, he immediately medicated away. Regret tasted like rust. He pressed his forehead to the soil and spoke, not sang, spoke directly to the chute. "I'm sorry," he rasped. "I was a coward disguised as a scholar. I measured graves and called it understanding. Forgive me." The shoot thickened into a sapling. Bark formed dark, scarred, beautiful. The first leaf unfurled, the exact green of Earth's ancient oceans. The silence howled. It lunged, and every human voice that had ever lived answered at once. Marcus was suddenly there, not projection, not memory, but present. Corporal Marcus Jackson, light-made flesh, standing between the sapling and the dark. Behind him, billions upon billions, farmers and poets, soldiers and nurses, children who never got to grow up, all of them wearing the same quiet, furious smile. Marcus placed a hand on Thexler's shoulder. The touch burned like sunrise. "Easy, Doc," he said. "Gardener's work is done, now it's time for the harvest." He turned to the host. "Family," Marcus called, voice carrying across the void like thunder made of mercy. "This one carried our seed through fire. He watered it with his own blood. He remembered us when his whole people told him to forget. What do we say to that?" The answer came as one voice, gentle and absolute, "Welcome home." Light exploded, not from the tree, but from every direction at once. Every star that had ever burned with human-reflected light flared white. The galactic plane became a sunrise. The silence shrank, folding in on itself, trying to escape the one thing it could not devour, being seen, being remembered, being loved anyway. The island of soil expanded again, 10 meters, 100, 1,000, pushing back the wound like dawn pushing night. The tree grew with it, trunk thickening to the width of a skyscraper, branches spreading into a canopy that blotted out the dark. The silence made one last desperate lunge, and shattered against the leaves like black. The silence shattered like black glass against living wood. Fragments of devoured meaning, half-erased songs, unborn futures, the taste of a mother's name on a child's tongue, rained upward through the newborn branches, caught by leaves that knew exactly what to do with broken things. Each shard was cradled, cleaned, kissed back into color. The galaxy inhaled for the first time in a million years and discovered it still had lungs. Dr. Thexler lay on his side in the warm soil, silver blood cooling into the earth. His carapace was split in a dozen places, breathing slits ragged, but the pain felt distant, almost courteous, like an old enemy who had finally come to apologize. Above him, the tree blazed with a light that had no source and every source. Its roots plunged through the new island of soil and kept going, threading the galactic plane like golden stitches, closing a wound the universe had carried since the first cruel thought was ever thought. Marcus crouched beside him, solid now, warm, smelling faintly of coffee and gun oil in the inside of an old church. "You're a mess, Doc," Marcus said fondly, pressing 2 fingers to the worst crack in Thexler's thorax. Light flowed from the touch, knitting chitin and pride in the same breath. Thexler tried to speak. Only a click came out. Marcus grinned. "Easy. First rule of resurrection. Nobody gets eloquence on the first try." Around them, the 53 exiles stood in a loose circle, stunned into silence. Some wept openly. Others stared at their own hands as if expecting them to have changed shape. The soil beneath their feet was spreading still. Kilometers now, green shoots pushing up everywhere, grass that hummed when the wind touched it. Rayleighs knelt nearby, faceplates streaked with silver tears. In his trembling hands he held the remnants of the pressed flower he had shattered earlier. Where the petals had fallen, white lilies now grew, impossible, fragrant, luminous. "Doctor," he whispered, "we're growing Eden in the middle of hell." Thexler managed a rasp. "Not Eden, just Tuesday. Humans always said creation was a Tuesday kind of miracle." Marcus laughed, the sound rolling across the new world like distant thunder that had decided to be kind. The trees spoke then, not in voices but in presence. Every leaf carried a different memory, and the wind moving through them played a chord that meant thank you in every language that had ever mattered. Marcus stood, brushing soil from his knees that weren't really knees anymore. "Time to finish the job," he said. He walked to the trunk. Where his palm touched the bark, a door opened, simple wood, no lock, the kind farmers leave unlatched for traveling strangers. Warm lantern lights spilled out. One by one, the human host, billions strong, began stepping from the leaves into the doorway. They moved without hurry. A woman in a nurse's scrubs from some forgotten pandemic paused to kiss Rayleighs on the forehead. A teenage boy with a skateboard tucked under one arm of pure light ruffled veils antennae like an annoying older brother. An old man in a firefighter's coat saluted Thexler with 2 fingers and a wink that carried the weight of cities saved and cities lost. They were going home. Not to bodies, they had outgrown those, but to whatever came next. A place the tree had kept warm for them all this time. Marcus was last. He looked back once. His eyes held every sunrise humanity had ever been too busy to watch. "We couldn't stay," he said quietly. "The universe needs its sky back, but we're leaving the door open. Anytime things get too heavy, you look up. We'll be the light that remembers your name." Thexler pushed himself to sitting. Pain flared and subsided like a tide that had decided to be gentle. "And the silence?" he asked. Marcus glanced at the place where the wound had been. Nothing remained but a faint scar of starlight already healing. "Love doesn't kill darkness," he said. "It teaches it how to become dawn. The silence is learning. Might take it a few billion years to get the hang of mercy, but we've got time." He offered Thexler a hand up. Human hand, Viari hand, didn't matter. They clasped like old friends who had fought the same war on different sides of history. "Walk me to the door, Doc." They walked. Behind them, the exiles followed at a distance, reverent. The grass sang underfoot. Overhead, the tree's canopy formed a sky of living green shot through with gold. At the threshold, Marcus stopped. "One more thing," he said. He reached into his pocket and drew out something small and silver, a cross on a broken chain, warm from a neck that no longer needed it. He pressed it into Thexler's palm. "Wasn't ever about the metal," he said. "Was about the promise underneath. Keep it, or don't. Just remember somebody once thought you were worth dying for. Turns out they were right." Thexler closed his fingers around the cross. It weighed nothing and everything. Marcus stepped backward into the light. "See you around, neighbor," he said. "When the stars feel too far apart, sing loud enough and we'll sing back." The door closed. The tree dimmed, not dying, simply settling into the patient work of growing. Silence fell, soft as snowfall on graves that were finally truly empty. Thexler stood alone beneath the branches. The cross pulsed once against his palm, warm as a heartbeat. Around him, the new world breathed, soil-rich with forgiven sins, air tasting of rain that had decided to fall upward into leaves. Rayleighs approached slowly. "Doctor, what do we do now?" Thexler looked up. Through the canopy, he could see the galaxy again, wheeling, wounded, beautiful. The Silence fleet still orbited, weapons cold, crews staring in slack-jawed wonder at the miracle they had come to destroy. He smiled. It hurt his cracked face plates, and he didn't care. "We go home," he said. "All the homes, and we teach them what happens when you plant hope in a graveyard." He took one step. Grass sprang up where his foot fell. Another step, a sapling. By the time he reached the edge of the island, an entire forest marched behind him, roots drinking starlight, leaves whispering lullabies in a million dead languages brought back to life. The eternal reverence waited, no longer a warship but a seed itself, hull already greening where the golden corridor had touched it. High Arbiter Clyde's voice crackled across every channel, ancient and trembling. "Thexler, report. What are your orders?" Thexler looked at the cross in his hand, then at the galaxy blooming around him. He keyed the all-channel broadcast so every ship, every station, every child hiding under a bed on 1,000 worlds would hear. "Orders," he said, and his voice carried the authority of someone who had died and been too stubborn to stay that way. Love something that isn't you. Start now. Start messy. Start afraid, but start. He cut the channel. Turned to his crew, 53 gardeners of the new age, and opened his arms. Behind them, the great tree shed one perfect leaf. It drifted down, slow as mercy, and landed on Thexler's shoulder. Where it touched, his cracked carapace began to heal, not into the old black, but into living wood shot through with silver veins that looked exactly like branches reaching for light. The forest followed him onto the ship. And somewhere in the place beyond places where stories go when they are finished being afraid, a billion human voices lifted in a cheer that shook the foundations of reality. The garden ship lit its drives, green now, gold now, alive now, and turned not for home but for every place that had forgotten it was allowed to grow, because humanity's grave was empty, and the stars, after a million years of silence, had finally learned how to sing again. They called it the verdant return. No one knew who spoke the phrase first. It simply appeared on every news lattice, every prayer wall, every child's chalkboard from the core to the rim. The verdant return has begun. The eternal reverence, now more forest than starship, moved through the galaxy like a slow green sunrise. Wherever it passed, barren moons sprouted silver grass that sang when the wind touched it. Dead worlds remembered rain. Ancient war fleets found their targeting arrays tangled overnight in flowering vines that refused to burn. Dr. Thexler no longer walked so much as grew. The transformation had begun the moment the leaf touched his shoulder. Living wood now laced his carapace. Pale heartwood showed between plates of obsidian chitin. Silver veins had become literal branches, delicate and strong, bearing small leaves that rustled with thoughts he had not yet spoken. When he was tired, the leaves dimmed to autumn bronze. When he hoped, they flushed the green of new earth springs. He stood now on the forward observation route, once a bridge, now a sunlit glade beneath a transparent canopy of living bark, and watched a gas giant's rings turn emerald as their ship drifted past. Rayleighs approached, footsteps soft on moss. The younger Vayari had changed too, his pale plating now veined with faint gold, antennae tipped with tiny white blossoms that opened and closed like breathing. The choir of Halos 9 has surrendered, Rayleigh said, voice hushed with wonder. They broadcast a single note, perfect middle C, and then laid down their harmonic weapons. They're asking to be taught how to sing again. Thexler closed his eyes. He could feel the choir's note still vibrating in the wood of his ribs. Send them the recipe for apple pie, he said, the one with the lattice crust. Humanity always said forgiveness starts in the kitchen. Rayleigh's mandibles twitched in what might have been a smile. And the entropy worlds, still fighting, Thexler admitted. But their children are planting seeds in the cracks of their bunker walls. Children always understand first. He turned. Behind them, the great tree's offspring had taken root throughout the ship corridors become groves, engine rooms now sun-dappled clearings where engineers worked barefoot in loam. Vale sat cross-legged beneath a young Rowan, teaching a circle of former Silence Fleet Marines how to whistle with an acorn cap. Their laughter sounded like the first honest thing those throats had ever produced. The cross still hung at Thexler's neck, now threaded on a living vine that pulsed gently with his hearts. Sometimes, when he was alone, he would press it to his lips and whisper the only prayer he had ever been taught by ghosts. Not luck. Someone wanted me to live. Today the prayer felt different. Less plea, more promise. A soft chime like wind through glass leaves sounded from the heart of the ship. The tree was calling. Thexler followed the sound down spiral routes that had once been stairwells, past cabins now hung with hammocks of woven moss until he reached the central hollow. Here grew the original trunk, the first tree vast and serene, its bark etched with every name humanity had ever carried. The air smelled of rain on hot stone and bread baking and the moment just before a first kiss. At the base of the trunk waited a single fruit, not large, the size of a clenched fist. Skin the deep red of arterial blood kissed by dawn, it hung from a slender branch that bent under no weight at all as though offering itself. Thexler's leaves trembled. He had known this moment was coming. The tree had been whispering it for weeks, not in words, but in the way orchards speak of autumn. He reached up. 4 wooden fingers closed around the fruit. It came away with a soft sound like a mother sighing in her sleep. Warmth flooded him. Memory not his own poured in like light through stained glass. Marcus Jackson, age 9, stealing an apple from a neighbor's tree and feeling guilty for 3 days. A woman in a concentration camp sharing her last crust with a stranger because hunger shared as hunger halved. A boy on a colony ship, first generation born in space, pressing his palm to the viewport and naming a distant blue dot home before anyone told him it was forbidden. The fruit pulsed once, asking. Thexler understood. This was not for him alone. He carried it back through the living corridors. Crew members fell silent as he passed, sensing the gravity of what he held. They followed without being asked, 53 souls and now hundreds more, refugees and redeemed soldiers and children born on ships that had never known soil. They gathered beneath the forward canopy. Thexler raised the fruit so starlight caught its skin. This, he said, and his voice carried the weight of roots and the lightness of wings, is the last piece of them that still remembers what it was like to be afraid of the dark. He looked at each face, Vayari, human descendants from hidden colonies, crystalline luminous, even a handful of penitent machines whose code had begun rewriting itself into poetry. They left it for us, he continued, not as a weapon, not as a relic, as an invitation. He pressed the fruit to his chest, just above where the cross lay. The skin split gently, willingly. Red flesh gleamed, seeds like tiny galaxies swirling within. The scent that rolled out was the smell of every good thing ever cooked on every stove in human history. Thexler took one seed between wooden fingers, held it up to the light. This one, he said, is for the entropy worlds, for the places that still believe mercy is weakness. He passed it to Rayleigh, who accepted it with shaking hands. This one, Thexler continued, taking another, is for the choir of Halos 9, who forgot joy is a note you can live inside. Vale took it, eyes shining. One by one he distributed the seeds, dozens, hundreds, until every hand held a piece of impossible future. When the fruit was empty, only the hollow skin remained, still fragrant, still warm. Thexler lifted it to his lips and ate what was left. Sweetness exploded across his tongue. Summer and grief and forgiveness braided so tightly they became one flavor. He smiled, teeth now faintly stained red. Now, he said, we go plant galaxies. The crew cheered not daily, but with the quiet ferocity of people who had seen the abyss and chosen to fill it with orchards. The eternal reverence altered course not for any single destination, but for every wound the galaxy still carried. Its wake left trails of green fire across the star maps. And on 1,000 worlds, in the middle of the night, people began waking to the smell of rain where rain had been extinct for centuries. They stepped outside and found trees growing where nothing should grow, roots cracking concrete and durasteel alike, leaves whispering a single sentence in languages no one had spoken aloud in a million years. You are not forgotten. On the bridge glade, Thexler stood alone beneath the stars, wooden fingers tracing the cross at his throat. Breeze moved through his leaves, gentle, familiar, carrying the faint scent of coffee and gun oil. Somewhere beyond the veil, Marcus Jackson was smiling. Thexler closed his eyes and let the wind speak for him. Thank you, the leaves rustled. We'll take it from here. Far away in a place that had no coordinates, a door that had never truly closed creaked wider, and something vast and patient and achingly kind leaned out to watch the gardeners begin their work, because the grave was empty, the sky was full. And the long defeat had just become the longest spring. They called him the arborist now. No one remembered who started it. The name simply took root and refused to be uprooted. Dr. Thexler, last scholar of the Cosmic Archaeology Guild, first gardener of the Verdant Return, stood on the skin of a dead world that had forgotten its own name and pressed a single seed into irradiated dust. The seed was small. The world was large. Neither fact mattered. He had done this 10,000 times in the last 11 years, objective. Time had grown strange since the tree first bloomed. Some sectors aged slower where the leaves' light fell, others faster, as though reality itself was learning how to breathe again. Children born on garden ships now had silver-green eyes that reflected starlight the way human eyes once reflected hope. The dead world was called Kithra Vi by the charts. Once it had been a forge world of the old Vayari ascendancy, its crust cracked open to feed warforges that built the Silence Fleet. Now it was a cinder orbiting a cold red sun, atmosphere boiled away, every crater filled with the bones of machines. Thexler knelt. His knees no longer bent the way they once had. Living wood creaked softly, joints wrapped in pale bark that bled gold when cut. Leaves, his own leaves, shivered though there was no wind. He dug with his bare hands. Soil came away black and poisoned, glittering with shattered glass and the powdered teeth of the dead. Rayleigh watched from the ramp of the garden ship second Monday, a vessel grown from a single acorn of the mother tree, its hull a cathedral of living oak and starlight. Rayleigh had grown too, taller, bark-armored, blossoms at his throat now permanently open, releasing a scent like forgiveness after rain. You could let the young ones do this, Rayleigh said quietly. You've earned rest. Thexler did not look up. Rest is what we gave the silence. Work is what we owe the living. He placed the seed no larger than a tear into the hole, covered it, pressed the heel of one wooden palm against the dust until it cracked like old skin. Then he waited. Nothing happened for a long time, long enough for the red sun to crawl a hand's breadth across the sky, long enough for doubt to whisper that some wounds are too old, some soils too poisoned, some sins too heavy for even mercy to lift. Thexler felt the old internal war stir, the scholar who catalogued extinction arguing with the gardener who refused to believe in it. He was tired. God, he was tired. Tired the way only immortals can be, tired of watching children learn war before they learn wonder, tired of planting trees on graves that should never have been dug. A memory surfaced, unbidden, Marcus Jackson's voice, rough with kindness. Some days the only thing that keeps a man human is being too stubborn to quit before breakfast. Thexler laughed once, dry, cracked, alive. He leaned forward and spoke to the dead ground the way a father speaks to a frightened child. I know you're hurting, he said. I know they took everything, sky, songs, names. I know you think nothing good can grow here again. I thought that once too. He pressed both palms flat now, leaves spreading across the dust like green fingers reaching for a pulse. but I was wrong. And you're wrong, and the only difference between a grave and a garden is what you decide to plant in it. A tremor, small, barely the width of an atom. Then the ground inhaled. A single green spear pushed through the black dust, thin, trembling, impossibly brave. It rose 1 centimeter. 2. Uncurled a leaf no larger than a child's eyelash. The red sun caught the leaf and turned it translucent, veins glowing like molten gold. Thexler's breath, he still breathed somehow, though lungs were now only memory caught in his throat. The shoot kept growing, faster now. Roots cracked the crust like gentle thunder. A trunk formed, pale and strong. Branches spiraled outward, drinking radiation the way wheat once drank sunlight. Within minutes, an entire tree stood where only death had been, bark silver as moonlight on water, leaves singing in a wind that had not existed an hour ago. From its branches fell soft rain, clean, warm, tasting of petrichor and second chances. Rayleigh fell to his knees. Across the planet, sensors on the second Monday went mad. Atmospheric regeneration, nitrogen bloom, ozone knitting itself from nothing. In the craters, machine bones began to rust into fertile soil. Thexler stood slowly. The new tree's leaves brushed his own, a greeting between old friend and new. He touched the bark. It was warm, alive, familiar. Because every tree he had ever planted carried a fragment of the first, every leaf a memory, every root a promise kept. Somewhere inside the wood, Marcus Jackson's laugh echoed, soft as apple blossoms. Thexler closed his eyes. Tears, clear now, no longer silver, ran down bark and were drunk by moss. Rayleigh whispered, "How many does this make?" Thexler didn't answer at first. He was listening to something only gardeners and the dead can hear. "Enough," he said finally, "and not nearly enough." He turned. The ramp of the second Monday lowered like a drawbridge into spring. Children, Vayari, human, crystalline, machine-born, spilled out, barefoot and laughing, carrying baskets of seeds that glowed like captured dawns. They ran past him into the new forest, shouting his name the way children once shouted for heroes who were only stories. The arborist watched them go, and for the first time in 11 years he felt the weight of the cross at his throat lighten, not gone, never gone, but shared. Because the work was no longer his alone. A soft chime sounded behind him, not technology, but wood remembering music. He turned. The mother tree, the first tree, the one that had grown from humanity's last heartbeat, had followed him here. Not the whole tree, impossible, but a piece. A single branch, thick as a starship hull, extending from folded space like a benevolent arm. At its tip hung a new fruit, larger this time, ripe, ready. Thexler's leaves trembled in recognition. He knew what it meant. Every ending is a seed. He walked to the branch, reached up. The fruit came away easily, trustingly. Inside, he could already feel it. The next question, the next silence that needed breaking, the next grave waiting to become garden. He pressed the fruit to his chest, over the place where 2 hearts, 1 Vayari, 1 human beat in staggered harmony. Rayleigh's joined him, eyes wide. "Where now?" the younger male asked. Thexler looked up. Past the new atmosphere, past the healing sky, to the edge of the observable universe where something ancient and cold was beginning to stir again, not the silence, something older, something that had watched the verdant return with interest, something that had never learned mercy because no one had ever been brave enough to offer it. Thexler smiled, slow, tired, unbreakable. "Home," he said. "We're going all the way home." He took 1 step toward the second Monday. Behind him, the new tree shed a single leaf. It drifted down and landed on the exact spot where the first seed had been planted. Where it touched, a sapling sprang up, smaller, tender, but already reaching. Because that is what trees do. They keep growing long after the gardener has walked on. And somewhere in the place beyond places, a billion human voices lifted in quiet, proud applause. The arborist boarded his living ship. The ramp closed like a flower at dusk. And the second Monday turned its green prow toward the edge of everything, carrying spring in its belly and mercy in its teeth. Because some stories refuse to end. And some graves, no matter how deep, no matter how old, are only waiting for someone stubborn enough to plant hope in them. The stars, once silent, began to hum a traveling song, and the arborist, leaves bright with impossible autumn, closed his eyes and let the ship carry him forward into whatever came after forgiveness. They crossed the membrane between what was and what might still be forgiven. The second Monday did not sail so much as unfold. Its living hull peeled open like petals of green starfare, revealing the heartwood bridge where the arborist stood alone. Every leaf on every branch of every tree that had ever grown from humanity's last seed turned toward him now, quivering in perfect synchrony, as though the entire verdant return held its breath. Beyond the viewport, there was no starfield. Only a wall of night so absolute it had texture, like velvet soaked in the concept of endings. This was not the silence they had fought in the core. This was the first silence, the one that had watched the very first light kindle and had decided quietly that light was a mistake. The ship stopped, not drifted, not braked. Stopped the way a heartbeat stops when the chest finally understands the joke was on it all along. A single fruit, the last fruit, larger than any before, hung from the mother tree's branch above the arborist's head. Its skin was no longer red, but the deep indigo of deep ocean just before dawn, shot through with moving constellations. Thexler reached up, 4 wooden hands, gnarled now with centuries of planting, closed around it. The fruit did not come away. Instead, the branch lowered itself, gently, until the fruit rested against his chest, exactly where the silver cross still hung on its living vine. The voice that spoke then was not Marcus's, nor any single human voice. It was all of them, braided so tightly they had become one quiet, vast, inevitable thing, like the sound of every prayer ever whispered in every foxhole, birthing room, and deathbed, arriving at once. This is the edge, gardener. Beyond this line, there is no story left to tell. Only the teller remains. Thexler's leaves rustled though there was no wind. I know, he said. His voice was the sound of roots breaking stone and meaning it kindly. You can still turn back. The gardens are flourishing. Mercy has taken root in a billion hearts. That is enough. The arborist looked back once. Through the open petals of the ship he saw them, his people. Rayleighs with gold blossoms at his throat. Vale, older now, bark white as forgiveness. Children of every species born since the return, their eyes full of reflected forests. They stood in silence, hands clasped, leaves trembling on shoulders that had never known chitin. None of them begged him to stay. They had learned better than that. Thexler turned again to the wall of night. I was afraid once, he said, speaking to the darkness as though it were an old friend who had simply forgotten how to smile. Afraid of feeling, afraid of grief. Afraid that love was a chemical error in a universe that did not care. He pressed the fruit harder against his chest. The cross burned warm beneath it. Then I met a species that burned itself to cinders, proving the universe was wrong. A pause. The knight listened. I am not going back, he said. I am going forward, because someone has to walk into the dark and leave the door open behind them. The fruit split, not dramatically, quietly, like a secret finally ready to be told. From the fissure poured light, not the gold of gardens, but the soft silver gray of dawn on a world that has forgotten war. The light touched the wall of night and did not push. It simply waited. The first silence recoiled, not in fear, in recognition, because the light was not attacking, it was remembering. It remembered the first photon that ever dared exist. It remembered the first hand that ever reached for another in the dark. It remembered every time someone chose kindness when cruelty would have been easier. And in remembering, it offered the only thing the first silence had never been given, a choice. The wall of night wavered. A single tendril of darkness, thin as a child's finger, extended toward the arborist. It trembled, curious, ancient beyond ancient, and for the first time in eternity uncertain. Thexler stepped off the Heartwood Bridge. There was no deck beneath him. Only the silver-gray light, holding him the way mercy holds the wounded. He opened his arms. Leaves spread wide, branches reaching, offering every scar, every healed crack, every place where bark had grown over old wounds. The tendril touched his chest. Where it touched, darkness became soil. Rich, black, loamy with forgiven eons. Thexler smiled, slow, tired, radiant, and began to plant. He planted the cross first, pressing it deep where a heart would have been. He planted every tear he had ever shed, every apology he had ever swallowed. He planted the memory of Marcus laughing in vacuum. He planted the sound of children running barefoot through new grass. With every planting, the darkness receded another inch. The first silence did not fight, it simply listened. And as it listened, it began to change. Tendrils thickened into roots. The wall folded inward, becoming trunk, bark, branch. Night unfolded into an immense tree, larger than galaxies, older than time, its leaves every color that had ever been lost. Its first fruit was small and silver and shaped exactly like hope. The arborist stood at its base, no longer Vayari, no longer separate, but part of the wood and the light and the story that had refused to end. He looked up through infinite branches and saw them, all of them, humanity not as ghosts now, but as living presence woven into the grain of creation. Marcus leaning against a branch, arms crossed, grinning like a man who had just won a bet with God, a woman in a nurse's scrubs waving, a child on a skateboard doing tricks in zero-G between the leaves. They did not speak. They simply opened a space exactly his size beside them. The arborist took one step, then another. Roots welcomed him. Bark closed gently around him like an embrace long overdue. His last act as a separate being was to turn and look back. The second Monday still floated where he had left it, petals open, crews standing in silent salute. He lifted one wooden hand. They lifted theirs in return. Then the tree closed and the gardener was gone, but the tree remained. It grew outward from the edge of everything, branches threading every universe that had ever been or might yet be. Its roots cradled the first silence and taught it how to become dawn. And on every world where someone had ever looked up and wondered if they were alone, a new tree appeared overnight, quiet, unannounced, simply there. Its fruit always tasted of apple and rain and second chances. Its leaves always whispered the same 3 sentences in whatever language the listener most needed to hear. You were never forgot. You are still allowed to grow. Come sit with us when you're ready. No one ever found the arborist's body. They never needed to. Because every spring on every healed world, when the first green blade pushes through soil that was once only graves, those who know how to listen can hear it, clear as birdsong, steady as a heartbeat, the sound of someone still planting, still hoping, still refusing to let the story end with silence. And somewhere in the heartwood of everything that is, or was, or will be, a man made of wood and starlight and stubborn mercy leans against a branch beside a soldier who died 1,000,000 years ago, passing a silver cross back and forth like an old joke they never get tired of telling. The grave was empty, the sky is full, and the stars, after all this time, have finally learned the words to the oldest song there is. Love wins. It always wins. It just sometimes takes the long way home.